It's 8:52 here in New York. I'm Bryant Gumbel. We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft. We don't know if it was a private aircraft. We have no idea how many were on board or what the extent of the injuries are right now.
We heard it and because I was just like standing there pretty much looking out the window. I didn't see what caused it or if there was an impact.
So you have no idea right now?
Oh, there's another one. Another plane just hit. Right. Oh, my God. Another plane has just hit. It hit another building. Flew right into the middle of it. Explosion. My God, it's right in the middle of the building.
This one into the East Tower?
Yes. Yes. Right in the middle of the building. And right now, that was definitely looked like it was on purpose.
You saw a plane?
Yes, I just saw a plane go into the building.
I can only begin to imagine the carnage that has taken place. We see an ember falling from the top of the floor of the Empire State Building. It's tough to look at, but let's look at it once again. After a plane crashed into the side of the World Trade Center, then another one, as our cameras were focused on the building, crashed into the other tower.
Jim, is now a very serious fire on the south tower of the World Trade Center. This is about, I would estimate, about the 60th or perhaps the 70th floor of the tower, right on the corner, the northeast corner of the south tower, flames shooting out of the building. We have absolutely no reports of who was in there, but you've got to believe it being around the 9 o'clock hour that people were just sitting down for a day's work in those buildings.
We should let you know it's an hour later in New York City. It's 9:26 in New York, and there are people that have been at the office inside those buildings, and we are talking thousands and thousands of people that work in those two towers who have been there for quite some time.
The World Trade Center, both towers gone, and we are all witnesses to it, and to some degree we are all victims. Tonight, there are survivors trapped in that rubble. Mayor Giuliani confirmed it less than an hour ago. How many, we do not know. Our reporters, as you've seen, have been on the streets all day. We begin with Jim Dolan. He is in the newsroom with the latest for us. Jim?
Bill, it was devastating as it unfolded, but only now, hours later, under the harsh lights of rescue vehicles, is the true horrifying breadth of the terror becoming clear. Before it is over, the casualty figures will be numbing, and few in the city will be untouched by what happened today. So often in the past, we've been able to say, it could have been worse. Tonight, this time, it's hard to imagine how.
Notify units to get over to the west side. 11 Avenue is closed off. They got a direct route to the World Trade Center. Everything below 24th Street, it's wide open to get down there and to respond to these locations. We're in that the World Trade Center. We have some of the individuals in the front. We're waiting to evacuate them, okay? I'm trapped here because from the previous collapse. I need some exit out, okay?
Are you at the west side of World Trade Center, the building number 1 in the street?
In the rear side of building number 1.
All right, 10-4. Units that are responding in to assist the trapped members, they're now reported to be in the rear of tower number 1. Rear of tower number 1. All units responding in to assist members who are trapped, the rear of tower number 1.
We have a few firefighters in the rubble on the collapse. We're trying to bring them back so we can assess the situation, okay? We have a report of building number 4, World Trade Center, imminent collapse. Building number 7, Battalion 1 from that location. Building number 1, the remaining 7 or 8 floors are in danger of collapse and are fully involved. We also have a PIN member that is located, Battalion 4-2, is at that location with 2 units. They are communicating with him at the location of 5 Wall Street, 5 World Trade Center. Okay.
Top floors collapsed down. I saw it blow and then ran like hell. Thank God. I'm 69, but I can still run.
was actually teaching English at a small private Catholic high school in San Jose, Costa Rica, Central America. And I had a 7th, 8th grade English class that morning. I started my day around 7:30. Well, anyway, probably between periods, at second or third period, the kids came in very distraught, saying in Spanish, telling me something. And at the time, I didn't really understand them. I was learning Spanish at the same time, and it wasn't, couldn't understand what they were saying. Later, a colleague, a teacher, coworker, came over and interrupted class and said, Nisa, do you understand or realize what's happening in your country right now? And I said, what are you talking about? No, I don't get the news. I don't have a TV in the place where I lived. And I was the only U.S. teacher, American teaching at the time. So he just said, I'm going to cover your class for you. You go down to the teacher's lounge where we had a TV. And he said, just check out what's happening. So I was like, what is he talking about? I would have no idea what he was talking about. And I walked in the teacher's lounge, and there it was on the news. They were replaying the plane going into the towers. And I just sat there, in awe for the next half hour, just watching it. And it was very hard for me because, what can I do when I'm not even in the country? I'm watching my country get terrorized. I didn't know what to think. It was very scary. I had watched it, and I think at lunchtime we went in there, a group of us, and I just kept watching it over and over. It was like a dream, like I couldn't believe that was really happening. I felt so bad, just scared to death, scared for the country. And again, because I was not in the country and I was, living in Costa Rica, I was just scared, helpless, not being able to do anything. Yeah, I definitely thank the firefighters and everybody that sacrificed their lives to help with Ground Zero. And also I do think about all the people that were killed, not just in the towers, but I think about being on the plane. That would be my worst fear, being taken hostage and knowing you're actually going to crash and probably die going in a plane. I just can't even comprehend.
When I first found out about the attacks, I was working at a call center, and we were working like normal, and then all of a sudden the call stopped, just suddenly. There was no warning, no nothing, and we just couldn't understand what was happening until somebody got online or somebody got called, and they were told about the towers. And I saw the second tower get hit. I saw the towers come down. There's one news where you could see people falling, like they jumped off. And I was, 7, 8 months pregnant, 7, somewhere around there. And it hit me hard, just that, being pregnant and being emotional, a wreck already. But it was a very somber day. Even when I went home, that's all we watched. It was just quite a change in just how you saw life. I mean, I had never gone through that. I mean, I was young. I was just 21 when that happened. Just the thought of jumping off a building, getting burned alive, or coming down with the tower, which people didn't know that was going to happen, or jumping off and dying. Either way, you were going to die, I guess, most of those people that were above that area where it got hit. I can't even fathom just what they were thinking about.
I remember we were pregnant with one of my children, and I was serving in the Mid-Iowa Drug Task Force at the time, and I remember sitting on the edge of my bed watching the first plane hit the tower. And we were watching the news when the second plane hit the tower, and then obviously with the rest of the country and the rest of the world realized this is not just a tragic accident. And then have that overwhelming sense of, oh my gosh, what are we in for, and what's going on, and what are we bringing our child into? That was our first, we were expecting our first child. And then, you know, serving in public safety and then find, you know, the aftermath of the collapse and knowing that there's going to be, you know, hundreds or thousands of people that weren't going to make it out of that. And just that sense of helplessness where you want to go help those people. And then knowing that we're in the heartland, the sense of the potential, you know, if terrorist organizations could reach out to the heartland of America, what kind of message could that send? So recognizing that we have our own responsibilities here. Beyond the terrible sense of loss, just the understanding the communications issues and challenges, and then of course those surfaced from then, and we've been dealing with those types of issues ever since, trying to make sure that the buzzword is interoperability, to make sure that those different disciplines have the ability to talk to each other, to coordinate responses. And here, you know, 19 years later, we're still struggling with those types of issues. Major incidents of that nature, it's not a singular response from a specific agency. You know, even here in central Iowa, and looking back in our tornado, we had agencies from, you know, different places in the state coming here that aren't on our radio system. So we do have those capabilities built in where we can bring in systems that are able to patch different types of radio systems together so we can talk on a common system. And another outcome of that was, in those types of critical incidents, to talk in a plain language. So instead of me using a 10 code that maybe another agency doesn't use, or some other type of code or signal that would mean nothing to a responding agency. So if I want to say I need backup at this location, well then we'll say I need backup at this location rather than speaking in an obscure code.
I first heard it on the radio, and then I turned on my television set to watch it. And in the midst of this, it's relevant that I was working as sort of a consultant for churches doing community organizing. And so I had conversations with pastors of some of the 11 religious groups that I worked with about, you know, whether it was affecting people locally and what response we might make. So that led to actually the creation even that day, you know, something that happened probably 2 days later, an ecumenical sort of prayer service. But we had conversations that day, and it was really very somber, but it also was, because of my position, it was a unique place to kind of get, I don't even know what you'd think of it as, but kind of a pastoral presence on the part of multiple priests and religious leaders, because I worked with Lutherans and Episcopalians and Catholics and Methodists and a few others. Watching that it was horrifying, and I don't think I could do it for more than about an hour, because at some point I get numb and it stresses me out too much, and I knew what had happened. I mean, you could see it 53 times during the day, I think, but probably by the early afternoon I got a phone call from friends of mine, the Malone family, a couple and 2 kids, who had been planning to fly from Los Angeles airport. I was living in Los Angeles, the next day, and they had already rented out their house in San Diego, so they couldn't stay there again. They were planning on sleeping that night on September 11th at a hotel near the airport, but they'd shut down all the airports for several days by that afternoon. So they called me and said, "Can we come stay with you for a while?" I went to probably 2 or 3 different ecumenical prayer services in the next several days, and had a very small role in trying to help shape that and promote it with the people in the nonprofit that I ran. And it was a different kind of reflection, I think, than was common for a lot of people.
I think it was about 7:30 in the morning. I think that's when the first plane hit the first tower, about 7:30 Iowa time anyway. I remember I was driving to work and I heard about it on the radio. And at first, it wasn't apparent it was a big jetliner. It was just the news hit and the media outlets were talking about a plane hit the World Trade Center. and we weren't sure if it was just like a little commuter plane or one of those tourism planes that fly over New York City or whatever. So, but it soon became apparent that it was much more serious than that. It could have been a huge jetliner. As soon as I got to work, since I work in the broadcasting television area at that time, I started rolling and started recording 3 different networks. At that time, I think I recorded maybe CNN, maybe Fox News, ABC, CBS. I recorded 3 different networks at the same time doing live coverage and started watching it live on TV when the second plane hit. And then there were just a lot of raw emotions thinking, wow, where is this ending? Is this going to keep on happening all over the country? Is this a huge attack on multiple areas of the country? And I felt right away, one of the first things I thought about is, this is my generation's Pearl Harbor. Because Pearl Harbor, our parents kind of described that, how big that was and devastating to the country to be attacked like that in such an aggressive way. That's what I felt it was that big, because, and it turned out it was that big and maybe bigger, as far as the attack on our country. So there was a lot of fear and anxiety, and a lot of people talking at work about it, and everybody huddled around television sets and watching that as it was happening, and it just kept on getting worse. And information about another plane then that was also hit the Pentagon, and then another plane that crashed in a rural area. So there was just a lot of raw emotions at that time, that morning as it was happening. At that time, I do remember the country coming together, and nobody was pointing fingers about, oh, it's the Republicans' fault, it's the Democrats' fault. There were no issues as far as partisan bickering or whatever. The country really did come together and really decided to work together, to grieve, to be angry, to look for some commonality. We all came together and tried to get through this together without pointing fingers, without yelling at each other, and there was really no common enemy either. We were just trying to figure out why this happened, and how could we have prevented this. And so I do know that I think there was a lot of patriotism at the time of America and pulling together, and we can get through this, and talking about heroes and all the people who died trying to save other people during that time.
There are a couple things I remember is no airplanes overhead. The skies were quiet, and it's amazing. I missed it, or I didn't know that I even heard it until it was gone. And I don't remember how many days that we didn't have as many airplanes up at all. And then also I remember I was working in intensive care at the time, and I was taking a tray into a patient's room, and she was, of course, lovely, and the TV was on, and we both saw the first airplane hit one of the Twin Towers, and we were just in shock. So that's where I was. I was working in intensive care on that day, and I was blessed to have an easy day so that we could kind of mourn. Intensive care wasn't as intensive at the moment, so we could just, go through that and work with our patients with it, and the rest of the nurses and monitor techs on that day, and it's just the shock of it all is amazing.
I was on the radio that morning at another radio station. I wasn't working here in town. I was actually working in Newton, and I was doing the morning show there. I was a disc jockey back then, playing songs. And we had a newsman, actually he's still there, same newsman, and he came in and said an airplane just hit the World Trade Center. And so what I was thinking was, when that happened, I was thinking of, you heard stories about airplanes that had hit the Empire State Building, during World War II by accident, or there was a small plane, a light plane that somehow got downtown New York, Manhattan, and ended up hitting a skyscraper. And that was the first thing that came to my mind was it was a small plane. I kind of put it out of my mind, the first airplane, and then he goes, a little while later, he comes back down the hall and goes, another airplane hit another tower of the World Trade Center, and I'm like, wow. All right, I'm gonna have to go see this. So I went down the hall, and we went into the newsroom, and I would say majority of the staff was gathered in that newsroom watching this little tiny television. I mean, it was, 18 to 20 inches. It was tiny. And about that point, you could just see that, it was on fire. There was a lot of smoke billowing out of the windows. And it wasn't a whole lot longer after that one of the towers collapsed. And then that's when it all kind of sank in, like, wow, this is real. As a broadcaster, one of the first things I thought of was, and you all hear the emergency alert tones that we play, the real annoying, most of it is for weather, related emergencies. But though, the emergency alert system was originally put in to warn, during the Cold War, to warn in case there was an attack of some kind on our country. Was it the Civil Alert, I think is what it was called back then, Civil Alert System or something like that. But anyway, so that was my first thought, is all broadcasting entities, television and radio, have, at that time, had a folder that had what to do in an emergency. And so I turned to the person that was working the front desk. I said, you better find the codes. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, there's a binder that has, like Foxtrot, it's got all the, the military codes in there that you're supposed to be able to know those in case a national emergency is declared. They will also use those same codes to let you know it's for real. And so I said, you better find that binder that's got all the, the civil defense codes. That's when I kind of knew it was real. Was watching the tower fall was when I thought, yeah, this is a little bit more than an airplane just flying in by accident into the tower. And then it wasn't long after that another airplane went down, hit the Pentagon, and then the one in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, in western Pennsylvania. So nobody really knew what was going on 9/11. The news agencies were doing the best they could. They were at ground level, or they had cameras mounted on skyscrapers that were far away from Manhattan that were showing the buildings, or they were across the river in New Jersey showing that angle. They were scrambling, the national news organizations. CNN is the one that comes to mind, that, they were doing the best they could to give you the facts, but nobody really knew what had happened at that point. But, that was kind of a scary time, because I don't know if people remember this, but the president was reading to school children. I don't remember where he was, a suburb of Washington, D.C., was scheduled to read a book to school children. The Secret Service came in and informed him. Famous photos of somebody leaning down and telling him as he was getting ready to read, what was going to go on. And they scrambled to get him out of there as fast as they could. He ended up on an airplane on Air Force One, and I think he went to Omaha, if I'm not mistaken. Flew all the way to the Air Force Base in Omaha to get away, because the air traffic was crazy at that time. You still had planes in the air, obviously. Not all of them were terrorists. So the air traffic control system was going crazy, trying to figure out if planes were going where they were supposed to go. they eventually grounded all airplanes, if I'm not mistaken, for a while, especially if the president was coming across the country. They wanted to clear all the airspace for him. But that was just a really crazy time, you know, for airline travel. And yeah, I just remember that, you know, the president being whisked out of that classroom, put on Air Force One, or, you know, I assume it was Air Force One, and flown to Omaha or outside of Omaha. And then I remember the press conferences where he addressed the nation after that, you know, where he talked about just a horrible attack has occurred on our country, and he vowed justice, and you know, it took a while. Obviously, it didn't happen during his presidency, but I remember that just being shocked. You know, just completely shocked by the whole situation, numb. I also remember I had and I know I wasn't alone. My oldest daughter was in grade school, and she was really young. She might have been in first grade. And I remember thinking, should I go get her at school? Should I pull her out of school? Because I know parents were rushing to the schoolyard because we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know if this was a full-fledged attack on our country. I do remember them locking down high-rise buildings in the Midwest. I remember Chicago, they were locking down certain buildings. So it was a really uneasy time, you know, as a member of the media. It was uneasy for me, but also as a parent. So that's what I remember most about 9/11. And then I kind of wish we could do this a little bit more nowadays, where Americans came together. There was a groundswell of pride. People that didn't put out their flags were now flying the American flag. It wasn't down, you know, it wasn't party lines. There was at that time no Republicans, Democrats, Independents, you know, whatever party you happen to, you know, Green Party, whatever party you happen to belong to, you were an American. And there was this groundswell of American pride, and we're going to get through this, and it's going to be okay. And there were patriotic songs, you know, Toby Keith and Lee Greenwood, and all those songs were getting a lot of radio airplay back then. I just remember there being just a ton of pride of being an American, and we can get through this. And I remember my dad saying, he goes, well, this is like Pearl Harbor. He goes, that's really interesting that you say that. He goes, this is like 1941 all over again. We've had a terrorist attack on American soil, and we hadn't seen anything like that, you know, since Pearl Harbor.
It certainly changed our lives, and we know now things can happen that we never dreamed could, and now it's time to trust in ourselves and making the world a better place.
Just realizing that you know, life is fragile and short, and you want to just keep your loved ones handy and close every day, because you never know what can happen.
It was just a pivotal moment of my life where you think of, it was before 9/11 or after 9/11, and just thinking of what world am I bringing my son into, and is this going to get better?